This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming back Wayne Byrne, the guy who wrote the book about Freddy's nightmares that I had on last year. He has written a new book, Walter Hill, The Cinema of a Hollywood Maverick. Walter Hill is one of my all-time favorite directors, probably my favorite. And we're going to talk about the book and talk about movies Walter made. You know, he made The Warriors, 48 Hours, Streets of Fire, Brewster's Millions, Crossroads, Red Heat, Johnny Handsome, Trespass, Geronimo, Wild Bill, so many great movies, Last Man Standing. And it's going to be a great conversation. Wayne is a great guy. I like his movie tastes, and it's going to be great to talk to him again. Also, happy belated birthday, I should say, to our mutual friend and my three-time guest, Beatrice Bopley. I forgot to say happy birthday on the air the last couple of days because her birthday's February 7th and today's February 10th. So I feel really bad that I've lagged on that. So happy birthday, Beatrice. I love you, darling. Every day I'm grateful that I'm friends with you. So yeah, here is my new interview with Wayne Byrne.
Hello.
Hey, Wayne, can you hear me?
Hey, Tommy, I can hear you perfectly, man.
Awesome. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, man. Great to talk to you again.
Yes, great to talk to you too. How's the weather in Ireland?
Pretty miserable, man. It's grey, wet, and cold. Hopefully it's better wherever you are.
Oh no, it's the same.
Oh, jeez. Well, you know, it's nice to be tucked up and watching some movies instead of being outside.
Absolutely, yeah. It's pretty foggy over here. So,
jeez.
So let's get into Walter Hill, The Cinema of a Hollywood Maverick. I skimmed through the digital copy you sent me, which I appreciate, and I enjoyed reading so many anecdotes about things I never even knew about his films. You've written, about Freddy's nightmares and Burt Reynolds and so forth. Why Walter Hill?
Well, it came down to the very simple fact that there was no books on Walter Hill available, and I really wanted one. And That's been the inspiration behind a lot of my books, where, there's filmmakers that I really love, but there's little to no literature out there on them. So in case, I said, well, if there's no books on Walter Hill, I'll write one. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. I feel, especially considering his legend in the industry and the legend of some of his movies, you would think that there'd be plenty of tomes out there. Now, ironically enough, at the same time my book came out, 2 other Walter Hill books came out. So 2 other writers were thinking the exact same thing as me, I'm sure. But my one was the first one to come out just by an edge. But that was pretty much the inspiration. I just really wanted a book on Walter Hill, and I thought, he's the kind of artist I'd love to write about and dig into his work, because there's a lot of his films that are kind of unloved as well. I thought this would be an opportunity for me to show some love to those movies and to do it with Walter and to do it with people he's worked with. So that was really the inspiration, was just to get a Walter Hill book on the shelves.
Yeah, he's certainly one of my top favorite filmmakers. His Western-like approach to every film and fairy tale-like storytelling is just so stylishly done. It's just, I've loved his movies as long as I can remember, and he's just a brilliant filmmaker, so underrated. So I was impressed by the amount of research you did. Did you interview people for it?
I did. I interviewed a good few people. I think it was about maybe 25 or 27 people. And I was lucky, some of these people I knew, they're friends of mine from, I've met them down the years on previous work and things like that. So it was pretty easy to access them. Now, there was a couple of people, of course, Walter being the hardest. He's not the kind of guy, he's not on social media. You can't just drop him a message and reach out, So I was lucky because a lot of people who I knew from the business were able to kind of help me reach Walter. So that was a great kind of inroad for me. They kind of, and they knew my approach to writing books, that it's not going to be kind of it's not a silly thing. It's not a tabloidy kind of thing. It's really digging into the art and the craft of these movies. So they were able to give Walter good recommendations, and I had done quite a few interviews. And then I got an email from, I think it was Walter's manager, who said, Walter would be interested to talk to you. So that was great. I met with Walter, and it was funny. He said, you've spoken to all my friends, so I think it's about time maybe I spoke to you too.
Yeah.
And that was great, because, I guess all these guys were going back and saying to him, you should talk to Wayne. He's doing whatever. He's doing good work. So I really appreciate that. And we had a great time. Walter was he was fantastic to speak to. We spoke a few times, and God, you could talk to him for a week. But he's the kind of guy who doesn't talk too much about his own work. He's a very modest kind of guy, and I had to adjust my approach, I guess, because depending on who you're writing about or what the subject is, I might tend to go deep into themes and ideas. But, Walter's not that kind of guy. He's not the kind of person to really intellectualize his work or to kind of big himself up in any egotistical way. So he's very, as you read from the book in his quotes, he's very matter of fact, and he's very direct and no nonsense, no bullshit. And which, of course, that's the way he directs movies. They're very economical, they're very direct. And, we just had a great time. It was really talking about the making of them, the time, what he experienced on those movies. And it was surprised. He said to me that once a film of his is finished, he never watches it again. And that was like, wow. So I don't know how he was able to talk about some of his movies, which were like 40 or 50 years old, and he hadn't seen them since. But I was able to bring up some good scenes to discuss, and he gave me some great insights into the productions. Nice.
Did you talk to him on Zoom?
Yeah, we did Zoom, so that was great. It's good. Zoom is always good. It's always better when you can kind of sit there for a few hours and see each other, and because a lot of the time we went off topic. We spoke about other things, some of which ended up in the book, just as anecdote. But we spoke, and I think this is what kind of set us off on the good path, which was we're both kind of film historians in a way. Walter's a huge intellect and a great film mind, so we kind of met on that level, and that really kind of set us off on a good footing. And we spoke a lot about things which separate to his own work, and that was great. Just it built a kind of rapport between us.
Oh yeah, I loved his interview on WTF with Mark Maron. He went fully in depth about things, about his love of Robert Aldridge and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, and we spoke about people like Raoul Walsh and John Ford and people like that, and we have mutual loves of certain filmmakers, especially from the golden age and the silent era and things like that. So I was in heaven, talking to a fellow film fan, film historian who just happens to be one of my favorite filmmakers.
Yeah. Who else did you interview that you liked?
Oh man, I really loved speaking to Nicholas Guest, who plays Harold Robert Ford in The Long Riders. He's a wonderful actor, and he's in so many other great movies. Van Dyke Parks was a treat. Oh my God, he's a legendary musician and composer, and such a unique man to speak to as well. He, transcribing his words was its own effort. He just has a certain rhythm and cadence to his speech, which I've never experienced before. He's very poetic, even just in his speech. Who else does?
Was he on social media, Van Dyke Parks?
I didn't realize until afterwards he is, but I found him through a website, just a regular website, a contact email that was there, and he got back to me. But I also spoke to, which was great, Larry Gordon, the producer, who's he's a Hollywood mogul apart from being a great producer. So to get him was a bit of a coup, and I got him through somebody, another filmmaker separate from Walter had worked for him before, and he said, "Oh, you should contact Larry," and he gave me his details, and we hooked up. So that was great. And of course, I interviewed, as I always do, several cinematographers, because I love speaking to cinematographers. Cinematography is one of my huge interests. So I spoke to Lloyd Ahern, Matthew Leonetti, Bobby LeBong, these really great directors of photography and cameramen who just gave me great insights into the look and the aesthetic approach of Walter's movies. And that's always a big thing for me, because my approach to these books are always, I'm looking at obviously the historical aspect of where these films, when they came out, what the industry was like, and where they fit in that kind of trajectory and timeline. but I'm also looking at the aesthetics and what makes them so special or unique. So I try to get a kind of a mix of, the craftsmen, the editors, the cinematographers, the composers, a few actors, things like that. A nice mix. I think I got there on this one, and of course the great stuntman and second unit director Alan Graff, who's been in so many of Walter's movies, and he did my forward. And that's, it's a thrill for me to see the cover of my book and see his name under mine. That's just blows my mind, because Alan, Jesus, I've been watching Alan in movies since I've started watching movies, and that's a long time.
Yeah, yeah, I enjoyed that forward too, and I reached out to Alan Graff a couple of years ago, and he called me on Facebook Messenger while I was sleeping, and so then I messaged him, and I didn't hear back. I should reach out to him again this year.
Oh man, you should. Yeah, Alan's a blast to talk to. He has so many great stories, and he's again became a friend, and we just love chatting to him. You can nearly write a book, and Alan, my God, he has such a huge career. Film, TV, and then his sports career before he was even in movies and TV. So he's an all-around legend. So kudos to Alan, and I thank him so much for what he did, providing that opening of the book.
Yeah, I loved reading about the bus flip story in another 48 hours. Yeah.
Oh man, I love it, and especially because some of my favorite Walter movies are those movies which are kind of lost in the cracks, and one of them is Another 48 Hours. I think Another 48 Hours is as good as 48 Hours. I probably enjoy it more. I think it's Walter times 10. It's and that's, I think part of that is Alan. Alan really brought this heightened sense of action cinema to Walter's already brilliant action cinema, and you can really see it on Another 48 Hours, and that bus flip, that stunt is just absolutely incredible. To think that it was done for real, which you couldn't imagine that being done like that these days. So Alan just brought a whole other level of skill and action to his movies, and probably it's up there as my favorites, but Last Man Standing I think it's so underrated. I think it's a beautiful film in every respect. I think everybody, including Walter, his collaborators, the cinematography is so good. I think it's probably Walter's most beautiful film, and it's ultra violent. It's a tough movie, and I never thought I'd be saying describing it as beautiful, but it really is purely on an artistic level. I think it's Roy Cooder's greatest musical score. I think it's the best thing Roy Cooder has ever done, full stop. And that's saying something, considering Roy Cooder is a legend in his own right.
Yeah, I mean, the first 48 Hours will always be a special movie to me. It was a movie my dad and I used to watch when my mom wasn't home, and I could quote the whole thing. I was lucky last year to talk to several people from it that I struggled to get for a long time, and finally I got them. And I just love that movie. It holds up. But I was shocked to find out that Walter wasn't happy with Eddie's performance at first.
Yeah, that was a kind of a big part of the chapter where I didn't realize it either, that, I knew it was Eddie's first movie, but I didn't realize the struggle they had in kind of reining in the performance to a kind of a film level. Eddie was obviously a brilliant stand-up comedian, but obviously whatever he was doing day to day, and the Paramount executives were like, this is not working. And Walter fought for him, in fairness to him, and he said, listen, I'm the director, it's my job to get the performance that we need out of him, rather than just saying, we'll get somebody else. So they really did work on it. They worked hard to get Eddie, and Larry Gross, the screenwriter, said to me, it's in the book, about finding their way in with Eddie, which is let him loose as if he was, on stage doing his comedy stuff, but within the parameters of the script page. So we need him to hit certain things, but let him loose. And a prime example of that is the kind of the country and western bar.
Yes.
Where he lets rip, and it's brilliant. And they really kind of they cemented that the Eddie Murphy that became a superstar in that movie. And it's a testament to Walter and Larry and everybody else who kind of got that performance out of him. And it is a brilliant film. I mean, it's like with you, it's one of those movies that I grew up with. and it's kind of inseparable from my early movie experiences. But I think just as I got into Walter over the years, and I realized he has such a huge body of work, and I've discovered all these other movies, I think the original 48 Hours is somewhere in the middle for me in the filmography. But I love it dearly anyway.
Peter Jason told me when they were filming that scene, he said he thought to himself, "This kid's going to be a star." I mean, he was just so brilliant in that scene.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I mean, he's a ball of energy, because you have Nick Nolte, who's this kind of gruff, stoic kind of guy, and Eddie Murphy's just bouncing all over the screen. But it works. It almost set the template. Probably did set the template for all these kind of future buddy cop movies that came along. Now I know, like for me, I could trace that back to Hickey and Boggs, which is Walter Hill's script from the 70s. Which was directed by him, starred Robert Culp and Bill Cosby. Even though they're not cops in that movie, they're private eyes, but it's still the same kind of dynamic. And the setup, the whole film is actually very similar to Lethal Weapon in many, many ways. So I wonder if Shane Black ever borrowed a thing or two from it. But, I think Walter is largely responsible for the buddy cop genre as we know it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I can't think of anyone else who did it. I mean, Freebie and the Bean was in 74. What's his name? Richard Rush directed that. And, but it took a while before the buddy cop genre took off with 48 Hours,
Yeah.
And of course, I love Streets of Fire. I know that Perret and Moranis, hated each other on that movie.
Yes, not a whole lot of love there, from what I gather. Streets of Fire is one of my absolute favourites of Walter's. Again, a film which has kind of gotten a bad rap down the years. It was a horrendous flop. It had the misfortune of coming out around the same time or the same weekend as one of the Indiana Jones movies. Good luck to any movie up against that. But it's a fantastic musical action movie, whatever you want to call it, and it's also kind of a neo-noir. It has that great look to it, that real dark chiaroscuro kind of thing going on, set against the neon lights backdrop. It's just a wonderfully designed movie, and I think it's the soundtrack just blows my mind. It's absolutely brilliant, and just a really, really great film that I think needs to be reevaluated. And I think you see some special editions coming out on Blu-ray, so I think maybe it is going to get in reappraised, or the opportunity for it to be appreciated is there now because people can access it. They can access a good, beautiful looking version of it. So that's the good thing about all these kind of physical media companies coming out these days and releasing the lost movies of our youth.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The first Walter Hill movie I can remember seeing and loving was Brewster's Millions, and in the book there's a perfect description of the movie, saying that it was it portrayed it portrayed the American dream as corrupted and skewered. I totally agree with that.
Absolutely, and that was one of my earliest Walter Hill movies as well. Obviously, because I watched it as a kid, and I was just looking at it as a Richard Pryor, John Candy comedy. I wasn't looking for any Walter Hill-isms or anything like that. And when it came to writing the book, I had to think about it for a second. I was like, what am I going to write about Brewster's Millions? Because I hadn't seen it in a few years, and I was kind of thinking, was it just a kind of a commercial comedy for Walter? And then I went back and I looked at it. I'm like, no, this is Walter Hill's Frank Capra movie, his Preston Sturges movie. He's doing all the things that Capra was doing, like Meet John Doe and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's a social comedy, and it's brilliantly so. But it's just, that's why I love Walter. He can make these very commercial, very kind of audience-friendly movies, but just under the surface is a great piece of kind of socio-political commentary,
right,
in the guise of a mainstream comedy, and I loved it. And then when I spoke to Walter, and I spoke to, it was Larry Gordon, I spoke to Herschel Weinberg, the screenwriter, they all said the same thing. They all kind of agreed with me, and they backed up. They said, yes, this was Walter Hill's. He's been wanting to do that kind of movie for years. In fact, they're going to remake The Great McGinty and things like that. And I was like, thank God. I thought I was kind of going off base a little, maybe, with the whole, American, the political commentary thing. But no, they said that this is his Frank Capra movie, and that's exactly what Frank Capra used to do. So I was happy with that.
Yeah, that's funny. I was reading that Bill Murray was almost cast. I just found out the other day he was in Who Framed Roger Rabbit for about a week, and then replaced by Bob Hoskins. And
oh my God,
he just wasn't communicating what they wanted. You know, he was being just as funny as the cartoon characters, and that's not what they wanted. You know.
Yeah. Oh my god, I didn't know that at all. That's pretty.
Yeah. It was like an exclusive secret there. Yeah, and I like how Pryor didn't want race to be a part of the story, you know, because I've realized that myself watching it so many times. There's like no mention of race in this movie.
That's right, yeah, and it's not as if like it's, you know, he's just an average blue collar guy who wants a better life, you know, he wants his team to do well, and he's just sucked into this kind of just kind of false ideal, I guess, you know, of what the American dream may hold for somebody if they're willing to play along, you know, this kind of morally corrupt kind of thing, you know, the whole, you know, it's like Trading Places, the whole idea of the two rich brothers just playing these two suckers along for their own gain, really. But it's brilliant. I love that kind of skewering of, I love that kind of socio-political thing, but done in such a audience-friendly way. You know, it kind of eases you into what is essentially a heavy theme. Mm-hmm. You know, if it was a serious movie, you know, we've seen kind of treatments like that before. You know, you see like the likes of Bonfire of the Vanities and, you know, Wall Street, where those themes are kind of talked about in a more serious manner. But I think it's great when a good auteur filmmaker can wrap everything up in a nice, easy package, but he's still getting those heavy themes in there underneath.
Did you reach out to Lynette McKee?
I did actually, yes. I never heard back from her, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've been trying to get her on the podcast since I started 6 years ago, and at that time she had just had an accident and she was in recovery, but we follow each other on Twitter and we tell each other jokes and make each other laugh and stuff. And she does want to come on, but it's just she's been through a lot, you know. But hopefully it'll happen. Yeah, but that's sad you didn't get her for the book, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't spend too much time kind of chasing people down. I mean, if I don't hear back, because I give myself on every book a year's deadline, so I don't wait around too long for people to reply. I mean, if I don't get a reply within a certain number of weeks or whatever, I can just move on and assume it's not going to happen. Now, the odd time someone comes back to me, you know, I understand they're busy, so they mightn't have gotten around to returning the call or whatever, and it's great if I can fit them in. Sometimes it's maybe too late in the stage to go back and do an interview with someone because maybe a chapter's already done. The book is nearly finished. But, you know, and I don't really like doing, you know, kind of asking other people, do they know so-and-so? Can you get me up, you know, hook me up with so-and-so? If they offer, that's good. I'm happy with that. But I just don't like, I prefer kind of, you know, reaching out myself and explaining the project and things like that.
Oh, even the offer isn't always valid. Like, I'll tell you, I had this one guest on a few months ago. He said, I'm close friends with Anthony Zerbe. I can get you Anthony Zerbe, right? And then I reached back a couple weeks ago, and then he talks to Zerbe, and Zerbe's not interested. I'm like, damn it.
Man.
Yeah.
That's it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, you know, it's hit and miss a lot of time. But I don't know. It's, James Remar was another one I tried to get, and I was just told through somebody he knows, they just said he's not really interested. And at that stage, you kind of just go, okay, that's fine. Move on next.
Yeah. Another one I love is Crossroads. I had no idea that Walter wanted a black kid originally, but yeah, he lost that bet because Macchio was under contract with Coca-Cola and Columbia at the time.
Absolutely, he was the boy wonder coming off Karate Kid. You know, and it's understandable. You know, he was obviously a box office ticket. So what I loved about doing the Crossroads chapter was talking to screenwriter John Fusco, of whom I'm a big fan. John's great. A lot of time for him, and his movies are fantastic. You know, Young Guns 2, I was always a huge fan of. And it was great that he features large in that chapter because it's really his story. It's I guess semi-autobiographical. And, you know, obviously when you're talking to someone who originates the film, you know, to me that's a goldmine because it's their idea, it's their baby. You know, it wasn't just a job for him. So he gave me a wealth of material, and as big as he features in the chapter, that's still only about 3/4 of it. There was a lot of stuff, you know, for editorial sake we have to trim. But I had such a great conversation with John, and so happy with what he contributed. It really, really made that chapter because it wasn't the movie that Walter and I discussed a whole lot. You know, certain movies come around, you know, Walter he would talk a lot about. Others he wouldn't. When it came to the failures, the ones which kind of didn't do well or they're not well considered,
right?
He didn't speak too much. You know what I mean? So I didn't push it with him. On certain things, I could see how he was maybe feeling about a certain topic, and move on. There's no point in kind of pushing things.
Yeah, I've been working for the last year and a half to get Dee Benry from the Warriors on here, right? And we have phone conversations every now and then. She loves Extreme Prejudice, and I'm not too... I know the movie exists. I'm not too familiar with it.
Oh, man, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It is a classic Walter Hill movie. I think, this when he says that every movie he makes is really a Western, that's a prime example of it's not a Western in kind of genre terms, but it is a Western in absolutely every way. Yeah. And I think, I had said it to him that I think this is homage to The Wild Bunch. No, I'm not the only one to say that. I'm sure other critics have noticed similarities, both thematic and kind of symbolic stuff. But Walter would be like, any movie that has a shootout that climaxes in a Mexican plaza, that's many Westerns. But I think there's many stylistic devices and thematic things in there that relate back to The Wild Bunch. And of course, Hill and Peckinpah had a working relationship going back to The Getaway, mutual respect for each other. So, I don't know, it's in there. Walter's on the record in my book saying, it's not so much of a direct influence, and there's me going, I think it is. So, yeah. But that's the beauty of being the author of the piece. I can kind of give my 2 cents and my opinion, so there you go.
Yeah. Have you ever counted how many movies have the bar Torchies in it?
Oh my God, I haven't, because, as I was going through the book, many of these films, there were certain, little details that I had forgotten about. And then I'm kind of going back going, there's a connection to a previous one, and there's another connection to a previous one. So it's like a little Walter Hill universe, Yeah. So, but no, I lost count of the Torchies thing. I'm sure I'll be watching the movies again and see another one that I missed before.
Yeah, it's just like, John Landis always has See You Next Wednesday in his movies as a tribute to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I love those little things, those little kind of, connectors between movies. But, Torchies is a big thing, and I didn't realize just how big it was until, you do your research on Walter Hill, and there's, websites which, are devoted to pinpointing all the, Torchies cameos.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so cool. So what are your overall favorite Walter Hill movies? Because you mentioned a couple there.
Oh yeah, I'd have to say Extreme Prejudice, Last Man Standing, Another 48 Hours, Southern Comfort, Streets of Fire. Man, so many. And I loved his new movie that just came out, Dead for a Dollar. Mm-hmm. I think it's his best film since Broken Trail, I would say. Yeah. Delighted that it's he's back doing an actual generic Western. Great cast. I'm trying to think what else. Other movies do I love? Hard Times with Charles Bronson. My God, what a debut.
Great movie.
The Long Riders.
Yep.
Geronimo. God, I'm going to end up listening to all of his movies. I'd probably be quicker just listening to ones that I don't think are the greatest. But
yeah.
So I mean, there's a couple of missteps in there. I think Bullet to the Head was a bit of a disappointment, even though it had it was produced by Joel Silver, directed by Walter Hill, it starred Sylvester Stallone. I mean, that's a holy trinity of action movies personnel right there. But there was something about it. It didn't feel entirely a Walter Hill movie, and he says it himself in the book that it was a job of work. He was asked to do it, he did it, and that's it's almost like a kind of a session work. Tomboy, or I think it's called The Assignment over in the States, is also I think it's one of his weaker ones. But there aren't too many Walter Hill movies that I would say are bad. Even though some of the weaker ones, such as those, and maybe Undisputed, I'm not a huge fan of, but they're still enjoyable movies. They're still better than most movies that are out there now at the moment in the cinemas. I'd watch them any day over whatever is down in my local multiplex. So a bad Walter Hill movie is still better than most other movies.
Yeah. Mine are like the Driver. I've talked to Ronnie Blakely about that movie. She's very proud of it. The Warriors, The Long Riders, 48 Hours, Streets of Fire, Brewster's Millions, Crossroads, and Trespass. Those are all my absolute favorites.
Oh, man. You just mentioned one of my top Walter Hill movies there, Trespass.
Yeah.
Trespass is one of my favorite movies, let alone favorite Walter Hill movies. There you go. It's an embarrassment of riches. There's so many great movies in his filmography that you end up forgetting about them when you're talking about them. But yeah, Trespass, as you probably noticed in the book, it's one of the biggest chapters, and that's just because I had so many things I wanted to write about, and I got to interview maybe 5 or 6 people on that movie, including the guys Neil Canton, Bob Gale, who also, they worked on Back to the Future. That was their baby. So a couple of big names there. Again, these guys weren't so easy they're not on social media, you can't just reach out. So again, that was kind of like some people said, oh, you're writing about Trespass, you should talk to Bob Gale, Neil, and things like that. So I was lucky in that people reached out for me and connected me with these people, because I never would have got to them otherwise. I wouldn't have a clue how to have reached out to them. So so blessed to have gotten those guys on. Big shout out to my good friend David McGifford. He really, really, came through for me there, and he hooked me up with a few people. And I love David. You should talk to David. He has a new book just out himself. It's his first book, called The Best Seat in the House.
Nice.
And he's look up his IMDb, and your jaw will drop at the movies he has made. It's unreal. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Rain Man, Brainstorm, Firm, Vanilla Sky. Wow. His career is huge. Check it out. All the Back to the Future movies. He's a great, great person to talk to, and one of my best friends. I love the guy, and he's been a great source of inspiration for me. And check out his book, because I was there. I spoke to David early as he was working on the book. He reached out to me because he read the book I did on Nick McLean, so he asked me for some pointers and advice. So I got to see the book kind of as it was developing, and I'm just so proud to see it out now. And it's just a wonderful book. It's probably the best film book I think that's come out in the last few years, and certainly my favorite book that I've read in a long time. So yeah, you should reach out to David.
I'll check his stuff out, absolutely. So, how was the reaction to Freddy's Nightmares?
Oh, to my Elm Street book?
Yeah.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Yeah, my God. Yeah, I think it's probably the one I've gotten the most reaction to of all my books, just in terms of fans sending me things sending pictures of themselves with the book or asking me to sign stuff. I'm like, wow. It's been pretty... it can be pretty overwhelming, you know what I mean? It's crazy. The horror fandom is brilliant because it's so loyal to the stuff that they love, And I kind of guessed going into it that Elm Street has such a huge rabid fan base that there would be an audience there for it, but I never realized just how intense that some people fans would talk to me who know way, way more about the franchise than I do.
Yeah.
And I'm the one who wrote the book in it, but they know way more. They're all into the whole mythologies and the inner reality of it all. The fictional universe or whatever. I'm like, Jesus, it's a whole thing that I'm only on the tip of the surface with my book. My book looks at the teams and the making of and things like that, and looking at it from a kind of the industrial perspective, but it's been amazing. The reviews have been fantastic. So yeah, I love that book. Absolutely love that book.
Yeah, I had Beatrice back on around Halloween time. I guess people are liking her book. Have you read it?
I haven't read it yet. No, she was actually... I spoke to Beatrice just before I think her book came out. I actually missed Beatrice. I would have loved to have spoken to her for the Elm Street book. And I just... Yeah. Again, I got, you've listed people you're going to reach out to, and you end up speaking to some, you don't speak to others. And I never got to reach out to Beatrice, for that chapter on part 5. And I'm raging I didn't, because I've spoken to her since, and she is so lovely, and I think she would have contributed a lot to that chapter and given great perspective on, playing Amanda Kruger and on the production itself. But, sometimes you just miss these things. Missed opportunities that only, it's too late. The book's either in production, it's in editing, or it comes out and you kind of go, damn, why didn't I talk to that person? But maybe for another book.
Yeah, it was her birthday the other day too.
That's right, yeah, I wished her a happy birthday, yeah. No, she's lovely. Yeah, she's really, really nice person.
She is. She's a gem, is what she is. So what's next for Wayne Byrne? Any new book you're writing?
Yes, I have a new book coming out soon called Hired Guns, Portraits of Women in Alternative Music. And I co-wrote that with my best friend, Amanda Kramer, who herself is, she's a professional musician. She plays in the Psychedelic Furs. She's been with them for 20-odd years.
Yeah.
She's played with the great NYC band from the 80s, 90s called the Golden Palominos. She played with Eurythmics, Thompson Twins, Lloyd Cole. She was in Information Society. So she's a considerable career herself. And we just love working together. So we've just finished this book, which is due out. I don't have a release date just yet. It's in the editing process at the moment with the publishers. And then we have a few other projects in the pipeline. But that's the next one that's going to be released. But just yesterday, I signed a contract for another book, which I will reveal very soon on my social media. But I can't say anything just yet.
Nice. Yeah, so you're switching over to music now.
Yeah, I'm kind of juggling it a little bit. With Amanda, there's an element of music in all of our projects that we have in the pipeline and what we've just done. So, one of the projects is it's mixing the two. It's film history, but it's also music history as well. So it's going to be really exciting. So can't wait to announce that one. I guess I'm slightly stepping outside of my comfort zone with a music.
Yeah, I love,
because film is really kind of my first and foremost. It's my expertise, but I've written for music magazines for several years, so it's not entirely out of my wheelhouse. But writing a book, it's a whole other beast. So, but I'm lucky to have Amanda there because she speaks a musical language that I don't. I maybe speak a cinematic language that she wouldn't necessarily have, but together it just really works, and I just love working with her. She's such a dear friend, and it's just, I just love spending time working on things with her. So if we get a book out of it, even better.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I love 80s new wave music, and I thought of something the other day. In the early 80s, you had all these synth pop bands. You had Flock of Seagulls, Duran Duran, Human League, all these synth pop bands. And then you had these guys that were considered new wave because of the times, yet they were incorporating old-time sounds in their music without any synthesizers. You had Haircut 100, Madness, Roman Holiday, Dexys Midnight Runners, the Joe Boxers. These guys who were incorporating old sounds, and yet they're considered new wave. It's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a time and place thing, isn't it? You kind of get lumped. It's kind of easy categorization from journalists, to kind of put a label on something. And I've probably been guilty of that myself down the years as a music journalist. But yeah, I think something comes out at a certain time. If it has a certain sound, they go, oh, well, that's new wave, or it's ska, or it's whatever. But, as soon as you see a trombone and a guitar in one band, it's like, oh, that must be ska. But yeah. But Amanda was in a synth pop band in the mid to late 80s called Information Society. You probably know their tunes, but I think that was her first main band. But you should check it out.
What's his name? Rob Paul?
I think he was in the band.
Yeah, I reached out to him. Go ahead.
Yeah, that'd be them. What was it? Pure Energy. What's on Your Mind was, I think, one of their big hit singles.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. They're from Ohio or something.
Minneapolis.
Yeah, I thought they were British for many, many years until I actually looked them up on Wikipedia.
Yeah. I think there was a Bands Reunited years ago on them on VH1.
Yeah, they sound kind of New Order like. That's why I thought that they were British.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but no, Amanda's super talented, and she's a great co-author. So I'm just so lucky to have her as a friend and a co-author.
Yeah, and that name, Hired Guns, it sounds almost like a studio-based film director.
Yes, exactly. And I think, there's kind of similarities in that the book is centered on kind of touring musicians. These ladies, female touring musicians who play with some major acts. So they're kind of like the session touring players, which kind of relates, I guess, in some way to a journeyman studio filmmaker. Who they kind of go in, they do the gig, they make the movie. It's not necessarily their baby. They didn't write it, they didn't produce it. They just came in, directed it, then they're on to the next show, next movie, next tour, whatever it is. So there is a kind of a similarity in that. So it does kind of correlate. But that's what that book is about. It's about 10 particular ladies whose careers we've chosen to profile, and they've played with some major acts. Gaylan Dorsey, for example, has played with David Bowie, Tears for Fears, Gang of Four, everybody. So that's the kind of level of musician we were speaking to and writing about. So really excited for that book. So that's going to be my next release. So keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah, last summer I interviewed this rock journalist, Jennifer Otter Bickerdike. She loves like 80s new wave, and she's friends with like the Bangles and so many different people. She posted a picture a couple weeks ago of her and Andrew Ridgeley from Wham, and I was like, wow, that guy sure hasn't aged well, I'll tell you.
I haven't seen him in a few years, but he was. Yeah, I think he got overshadowed a bit by George Michael.
Yeah, she writes. She wrote a book about Nico, about the Velvet Underground and stuff, and she knows a lot about great music and stuff, and you should check out her stuff. And she's very funny, I'll tell you. She's a force of nature.
Cool, very cool. Yeah, it was an interesting few years when I was doing that myself. Rock journalism or music journalism. It was I don't know. I think it was my wrong era, man. I think it would have been better if I was old enough to have been doing it in the 80s or 90s, because I with all the albums and singles that I was reviewing, I found myself not giving very many 10 out of 10s. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like, I don't think this is my era, but I was just happy to be writing for the magazine. I wasn't just doing music. I was reviewing restaurants, reviewing concerts, reviewing books. I was doing everything other than movie stuff, actually, which was kind of strange. So I guess they already had somebody for the movies, but it was a cool time. And the magazine I was working for was a magazine that I grew up reading. So to be working for them, to be asked by them to work for them, was such a huge thing for me. I just like, yes, I'll do it. So that was fun.
Wayne, thank you so much for coming back on. And yes, I really enjoyed the book. I'm gonna keep reading it. There's a bunch of stuff I haven't got to yet, but I enjoy it, and I hope this is a big success for you.
Oh, thanks so much, Tommy, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. It's always a pleasure talking to you, because you're such an enthusiastic, knowledgeable interviewer. It always makes it easier. It always makes it easier for me. You make me sound good.
Thank you. My pleasure. You have a great night over there, and be safe.
Cheers. You too, Tommy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Well, there you have it. Wayne Byrne. Ain't he a cool dude? Oh, I love talking to him. And he's right. I am knowledgeable, and I appreciate that. It's always my pleasure to talk to people who know what they're talking about, fellow historians. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Oh, and by the way, www.waynebyrne.com. Later, dudes.